Hi, I'm Driti Shah, and this is my podcast, Have You Thought About? I'm a writer who loves to find out about what passions people are pursuing, especially if they're managing to blend their skills together in unusual ways. In each edition, I'm going to chat with someone I find particularly interesting and who's managed to fit things together in their life or profession that you might not think of as an obvious match. Here, I'm speaking to Aaron Blaise, animator, filmmaker, and co-founder of Feature Art Feature. Now, Aaron, I've been a huge fan of yours for a while. You have this amazing Instagram account. It's been around for ages, and you can learn how to draw animals. It's certainly been an inspiration for me. But you've got this rich history when it comes to animation and storytelling. 21 years
Yeah.
with Disney, working on classics Aladdin, The Lion King, Beauty and the Beast, The Rescuers Down Under, nominated for an Oscar for Brother Bear. And now you've created something very, very special with your animated short feature, Snow Bear. So, for those who don't know, for who it's an introduction, what is this about? What was your aim?
I was with Disney for 21 years. And like you said, I'd worked on a lot of features during my time there. There came a time where it was time for me to leave. I wanted to start out and go off into another direction. 19 years ago, I lost my wife to breast cancer. And it was during that time that I really became kind of directionless. I lost my drive for filmmaking, was really struggling at Disney. And so I came to a point where I realized, I need to find myself again. I need to start over. Because at that point, Disney and my family were really the two defining factors in my life that made me who I was. And they were both crumbling. And so I left Disney with the intent of redefining myself, finding myself again, trying to heal. And so I came back to Florida, my home state. I had relocated to Los Angeles and I kind of started over. I worked with another company for a little while. They went bankrupt. And so that's when I really said, you know what, I want to just come up with something new. And I started this art education business, this online art education business. But after a while, I realized I want to make films again. Once I started to get my feet back under me, and I'd never made my own film. I'd made films for Disney, but this is an opportunity to make something of my own, even though it's a short. It was still something that I could express myself with. I took that last 19 years, 20 years of my life, 30 years really, of kind of some of the things that I had experienced emotionally, and I boiled them down into this story about this lonely polar bear wandering the Arctic who goes through this loss and then ultimately gets his feet back under him and finds love and finds companionship again, which is exactly my story. 8 years ago, I met my business partner's sister-in-law, his wife's sister, and we fell in love and we got married 3 years ago. And so I thought this is a great opportunity to kind of metaphorically tell that whole story through this polar bear.
I don't know if this was even sort of part of what you wanted to do to include, but I have a late diagnosis of autism and ADHD, and I've often expressed like feeling of not belonging in spaces
Yeah.
or not being able to finding it hard to make friends. And so
Yes.
even and I had a lot of imaginary friends growing up as a kid. So even that sort of element, is that something that sort of come forth, or is that is that what you're not expecting to hear that
No,
it was
I
definitely
love
happening?
hearing that actually. One of the things I try to do is when I write a story, what I just pitched to you was what it meant to me. But I also try to tell the story in a simple enough way. One of the ironies of making a story very simple is that it becomes more complex. And what I mean by that is that, if you can get a story down to its roots, down to its raw emotion, then your audience will bring their own stories to it. So in your case, you're bringing your story to it and you identify with it in that way. And that to me means I did my job right because I really want the audience to identify and empathize in their own way. They see themselves, that's what I want when I tell a story is I want the audience to kind of lose themselves in the story. And the way to do that is for them to see themselves, to empathize with that character. And in my way, I did it through my story, but you're bringing your own story too, which I find really, really cool.
But you also have that message around the fact that we do have a climate crisis right now. We do have challenges there, but it's not an in your face message. Like,
Right.
how did you ensure that that was a key part of the storytelling? Because it's important to
It's
have.
well, it's funny how that evolved because I knew when we started. By the way, your wallpaper behind you is really cool. I just realized.
I love wolves so much. And so again, part of what I watched with you is it was when you've done wolves and stuff. And you went, yeah,
Yeah.
ages ago, you liked something on my Instagram. years and years ago, and it just made such a difference. But this is a wolf shawl, so I use it as my
Oh,
background.
it's very cool. Anyway, sorry, didn't mean to sidetrack. But I started out, I didn't want to tell an environmental story at first. I wanted to tell a story about a polar bear, a lonely polar bear living in the Arctic, going through a seasonal change. That's what I saw my life. I saw my life as going through the seasonal change. The Arctic goes through seasonal changes as well. Every time I showed the film, when we got to the point where the ice was melting, everyone said, "Man, I really like that environmental message that you're putting in there." And at first, I didn't want to do that because I felt like I didn't want the audience to feel like it was a public service announcement, a PSA type commercial. So I came at it from this emotional storytelling first. I kept getting more and more of these comments about, I really like the environmental message. So I finally said, you know what, I'm going to lean into it. I already had the character's emotional journey established. So then I went in and really leaned into that environmental message and or theme, I should say. It wasn't really a message, but a theme. I started doing more and more research in the backgrounds toward the end of the story. That I added, melting permafrost. I really pushed the idea of the Arctic melting rather than just a seasonal change. It was a global change that's happening. That's what I pushed. But I think it worked because I focused on first the emotional story, the polar bear story. That's what I focused on first. And then I let kind of the outside world evolve on its own a little bit later. So I think that's why it worked a little bit better.
There's no words in this
No,
film. It's a wordless film, and as someone who's worked across like different languages in my previous career, that's quite important because it means that it's actually quite accessible to a lot of people as well. Again, was that quite deliberate from the outset? Or
absolutely right from the beginning. That's exactly what I wanted to do. I have no budget. I'm not with Disney anymore. So I don't have the budget to pay. I barely had the budget to pay for the score, let alone pay actors. And I'm an animator, which means I love to tell stories through pantomime, right? One of the things we've always done at Disney was that we've always gone into telling our stories with the prerequisite for ourselves that anybody watching this film should be able to turn the sound off and still understand what's going on with the story without dialogue. And so that's always been part of my training. But I wanted to be able to, the idea of loneliness and feeling lonely and being an outsider, that's a universal trait. That's not a cultural feeling. Everyone goes, I don't care where you're from. We've all gone through that. So if I could get rid of the language barrier and having to dub in multiple languages and just tell it through pantomime, then all of a sudden I'm opening it up to the world. And so that was my intent right from the beginning. I wanted it to cross language and cultural barriers because we all share these same basic insecurities and emotions and everything else. So that's what I wanted to do right from the start.
there's no words, but there is music. I mean, in terms of the score, at what point was that process considered? Like, how did you do that in
Once
terms of
again, that's right from the beginning because the score, especially in a film with no dialogue, you're going to lean on sound effects and you're going to lean on music to carry that emotion. That music is really going to amplify the emotion. So I have history with Mark Mancina, who scored the film. He did Brother Bear for us. He also did Tarzan. He's got a lot of great experience with Tarzan, Sea Beast, Moana 2. He just did Mufasa. And he really was excited, him and Marlon Espino, who did it together. They got really excited by the fact that this was a dialogue-free film. And they knew that the music would really carry it. And one of the great things that Mark does is that I like to cut a temporary score, meaning I get an idea of what I want the music to be. I scour my library and the internet for all the different scores out there that kind of match what I'm trying to get across. I used some of Castaway and other films that really kind of had the flavor of what I was looking for, and I cut that together for Snow Bear. That was the initial kind of temp score that we did. And then I went to Mark. Sometimes composers don't want to hear that. They don't want to be influenced. But Mark's great at not being influenced by it, but at least understanding the flavor of what I'm looking for. So he's like, yeah, if you want to play it for me, go ahead. So I did. I played him that score and he goes, yeah, I get what you're going for. Let me go away and we'll write something completely new, but I think you'll like it. And so that's what he and Marlon did. And piece by piece, we pulled it together. And that's how we ended up with the score that we did.
When you have that creative vision and that idea in your head, were there any disagreements at all in terms of no, that doesn't quite, in terms of that coming back and forth, or was it straight away each time? Yes, yes, yes.
And bigger projects, yeah, we do run across that. And even then, that's what one of the reasons I went back to Mark is that Mark and I really we fire on the same cylinders, and we rarely, even when we were making Brother Bear, we'd never had disagreements. There was a lot of, yeah, this is great. Why don't we try this? Things like that. Or I was thinking more something like this. Oh yeah, I get what you're saying, and would be like that. With Snow Bear, other than I think there was a couple of like timing issues where I thought, why don't we bring this piece in here and we'll bring this piece in here. The music didn't change. It was just the timing of it. There's a little bit of that back and forth, but it really, it just bang, bang, bang. It fell right into place. That's one of the reasons why I love working with them. We just click.
And now you're sort of in the festival arena in terms of ensuring that the message is out there, that the right audiences, all the audiences are seeing Snowbear. That means you have to go back into entrepreneurship, so slightly away from the creative process, perhaps. Like, how do you manage that element of the marketing, the distribution, the making sure that people get it, which is not, let's face it, as fun as the creating.
No, it's not. And and I've never done it before. Once again, I'm doing everything kind of backwards. I started really big with the big film company like Disney, and now I'm doing the independent world, which is kind of backwards. Having been with Disney for so long, I was always insulated from all of that. I never had to be part of the marketing. I never had to be part of any of that stuff. I needed to make the film and make a marketable product, but I never had to deal with that part of it. And so that was all a brand new learning process for me. Yeah, it's been difficult, but it's been interesting as well. And now that I know the playing field, I want to get back out there and do it again because I find it interesting, and I like the world of independent filmmaking. It's harder to get the film made, but it's really fun once you do. Once you get it made, it's satisfying. Yeah, I'm ready to do it again. I'm already writing new films and new stories and trying to get new stuff off the ground.
I was going to say, but how do you juggle that? So, because I used to work at the BBC, again, that element of insulation and then now going freelance. So, having that, like, how important, I guess, even though you're independent, how important is community to you in the fact that you are now having to juggle being a business person as well as
Right.
creative?
Well, it's interesting because community, that's what supports my business. So I've spent the last what is it, 15 years now, since I left the studio world, building this online community that supports my business, that creates revenue that I can live off of so that I can go off and make films. One of the things that we wanted to do because of that, we knew we had this community. We did something a little different in making Snow Bear. We knew that we were making a short. We also knew, which is a hard thing to market. A short film, they don't fit into any kind of category that you can go out and create revenue with. But we also didn't have the marketing power of Disney. Just because I worked for Disney doesn't mean I can make something and everyone wants to see it. So I thought, let's do something a little different that big studios don't do. I want to bring the audience in through the entire process of making this film and build the audience as we go, try to create word of mouth. So right from the beginning, for 2.5 years, right at the very start, basically from the time that I storyboarded it, I live streamed the making of it every Tuesday and Thursday. People that were parts of my website, they could tune in and sit with me for sometimes 2 hours, sometimes 5 hours. I might be animating, I might be designing a character, I might be storyboarding, I might be painting a background, but they could tune in and watch. And the word spread so that by the time we finished, there was a big community of people that wanted to see the finished product, which was really cool.
That element of transparency, that must have been
Yeah.
actually quite important. And in terms of right now, we're in a world where, let's face it, things emerge, generative AI, that falls into that. How important was that transparency for you, not just for the community building, but also showing that process, which is, let's face it, old school. You've got an old school way of
Yeah,
creating something, which is traditional. It's beautiful, but it's old school.
it is. Well, what's interesting is that, AI wasn't really a thing when I started this, even, like 3 or 4 years ago. I mean, AI was out there. We knew about it, but it wasn't what it is now. And like you said, I'm glad that I have all of this proof that I made it by hand. And it's interesting, the deeper we get into this AI world, I think we're going to see two different directions. We're going to see this direction where AI becomes more mainstream. People are going to use it as a tool to make films. I don't think we can stop that. And people keep, a lot of people come and ask me, what are you going to do? I said, I'm not going to do anything. I love making films by hand. I love doing it, as you say, old school way. That's, because, when photography came about, people didn't stop painting. One way I explain it is, for me, the finished product is the bonus. I love the process. I love sitting down and creating life with my fingers, sitting down and doing 12 drawings, 24 drawings per every second and seeing those drawings come to life. That to me is like a drug, and I want to keep doing it. And I think that you're going to see, I think the general public will kind of go in two different directions as well. I think there's going to be a little AI fatigue at some point, in the same way that we had a little bit of CG fatigue when CG first started coming about. And I think people will be a little hungry for handmade, as we call it, artisanal art, contrary to what a lot of people believe. I could be wrong, but I think we're on the cusp of a big surge in human created creativity, for lack of a better way of putting it. Human created music, art, all of that. People are going to want to see, what people are doing. I think we'll have a lot of people getting into the AI world and creating stuff on their own that they were never able to do before. But I think that human-made sector is safe and sound.
Started seeing elsewhere. I don't know whether it'll catch on, where especially within some of the book world, where people are writing this was written by a human, which is like, is that the stamp that needs to now be watermarked on everything. Although,
Yeah,
actually, talking of watermarks, are you ever afraid that you're a creative, you're putting your work out there, you are on social platforms that are not your own?
yeah.
This is the thing; these are third parties. Things get nicked. Things get
No,
nicked incredibly. What's your
I've
approach?
I've had to live with that from the beginning. I think that's just part of living socially, or working socially in the way that we do. That's just part of it. There's no way you can stop that. Even from an AI standpoint, using my stuff to generate other stuff. Even before that, there's people that take it. There's people that plagiarize our courses or whatever. It's so small. And if I spent all my time getting worked up about that, I wouldn't get anything else done. It's been a tiny, tiny little part of the business that I do. Generally, people are happy to come on. They appreciate what I do. I've got such a treasure trove of stuff left to do in my head. I'm just going to keep making it and putting it out there. And like I said, if I spend my time, worrying about stuff getting nicked, like you said, I wouldn't get anything else done.
You've been involved with some groundbreaking classics over the years. They've imprinted themselves on people's lives. Like, people literally change their lives in order to whether
Yeah.
it's Disney or, what is it like to be a canon maker? Do you take heed of it, or do you like, did it boost your ego? Like,
At the time we were making those films, we didn't really think about it because, back during the time of The Little Mermaid up till, through The Lion King, like say, there wasn't much of an animation market. It was kind of out there, but it wasn't like what it was through the late 90s and into the 2000s and what it is now. That world just didn't exist. So we just made animation because we loved making animation. Now we're to a point where, in the last 10 or 15 years, we're really seeing the impact that had. I spent a month in China a few years ago where I was going around teaching. And, this is 20 years after we had made The Lion King and the Mulan and some of these other films. And I'm talking to kids that are 5 and 6 years old. How many of you have seen The Lion King? Every kid raise their hand. That still blows my mind because, it's crossing cultural barriers. It's crossing age barriers because these kids, this film was made 20 years before they were born. It's still having that impact. So that, to me, is still crazy to me. It blows my mind. And I love that. I still don't picture myself as someone that's had the impact that you're talking about. I'm glad that I was there. And all of my friends that were there are glad that they were there because it was an honor to be able to do that. But it was also, I don't know, really cool to have spent my life not just getting paid to make cartoons, but to make cartoons that had that kind of cultural impact is really amazing to me. I had someone that contacted me on social media that were named, they were named Kenai and Coda. And them and their brothers were named Kenai and Coda from Brother Bear. And I remember I came up with those names. We came up with those names with a dart, throwing them at a map of Alaska. And here's two kids named that because of me throwing a dart at a map. That blows my mind.
How do you make sure that you stay rooted when there's all this crazy, amazing things that you've been part of in terms of the legacy of storytelling in many, many different ways?
Well, it's not like, I mean, we're not big celebrities. We're animators. So I still got to get the dishes done. I still got to take the garbage out. My daily life is still, sitting here and drawing. I don't have the interaction that like a celebrity would have. And so that's one way of doing it. It's just the work that gets out there. That's one of the benefits, I think, of being an animator is that, I've created characters that everybody in the world knows, but you don't know who the guy that did it. So it's an anonymous, job in that sense. People in the animation industry know, but outside of that, if outside of the animation industry, nobody knows who Aaron Blaise is, but they all know Kenai or they all know Simba. They know, Nala, those types of things. So that's kind of cool.
For a very, very weird twist of fate, I've actually interviewed a guy called Hamid Ibrahim. I don't know if you've met him yet. He's behind Kigali Media that have created Iwaju, which is on Disney Plus. And I was chatting to him, so it worked out very serendipitous with both of you. And he was saying it was Lion King. When he watched Lion King, heard the Swahili, Ugandan born, it made a huge difference. I'm like, you two need to talk. So it's like that generational thing. It's absolutely amazing. And I just feel
Yeah,
honored to observe it and then be like, whoa.
it's
But
very cool.
it is super cool. But your social media creature art teacher, it's become a classroom for like thousands. You have like millions of followers on YouTube.
Yeah.
But you're teaching everybody. But is there any particular lesson that your followers, those who've engaged with you on this journey of independence here, that they've unexpectedly taught you?
That's great. It's that determination. I think I've always been determined. I was a little bit cynical going into it, with people. And one of the biggest things, just how appreciative and loving everybody has been with me and supportive of me. That to me, I believe in karma. If I'm good, I'm going to get good back. But it's just been overwhelming. Our mission statement when we started this, I wanted to do something that my late wife would be proud of when I first started this, put some good back. I knew that my days ahead of me were less than the days behind me. And so I want to, it's the classic thing. As you get older, you want to do something that matters. And I also knew colleges, especially here in the United States, private art schools there's tuitions have skyrocketed, gone through the roof. There's so many young people out there, especially here in the States, like I said, that can't afford to go to school, that are, to have this incredible ability that they can't nurture it. And around the world, there's a lot of places like that. So we thought, what, why don't we make our courses, why don't we price them to the lowest economic denominator, price them so that anybody can afford them. People will flock to us, and it's really worked. And what's really great is in the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years or so, we've started getting a lot of people coming to us saying, hey, I couldn't afford to go to college, but I took your courses and I just got my first job in animation. And that really makes me happy because I had incredible animators and artists and people along the way that supported me. And so I'm so happy that I can be able to do that back online. It's cool. It's super cool.
What's it about animals that you love to draw so much? And what's your favorite animal that you just keep returning to again and again?
It's a sense of empathy. I have always, since I was a little boy, empathized with animals. To this day, I can't kill a fly. I see a soul in every animal. I always call them our fellow earthlings. We're not the only earthlings. We share this earth with a lot of other earthlings. And I've always been fascinated by their beauty, by their forms, what makes them work, their physiology and their soul. And I love to try to depict that in drawings and paintings. And so that's where it started. Like I said, it's the first thing, As a boy, artistically, that inspired me was nature and animals. As far as what is my favorite, I started out with I grew up in Florida. So there's a lot of birds here in Florida. I love drawing birds. I was always fascinated by flight. I'm an amateur pilot. I like to go out and fly ultralights, and I just love flight. So that always fascinated me. But I also love big dramatic animals, elephants, big cats, bears, obviously. But I love the whole, animal world, everything. I do have favorites that I like to draw, but I really, I love it all.
If Snow Bear was to be adapted into a full-length feature, what else would you want to explore in that story?
It's funny because I've written a prequel that's feature length to Snow Bear, and it's called Polar. And it's about our polar bear character when he was a cub, and how in this story, he is separated from his mother and he has to make this journey to find her. During that journey, that he accomplishes all these things to the point where he doesn't need her anymore. That's really kind of the drive of the story. And so it's that exploration that, and it sort of mimics the journey of making a film, where you see this incredible journey ahead of you, but you start with that first step. If you keep your blinders on and don't think of it as a sprint, but think of it as this marathon. I just need to get one more mile. I just need to get around that bend. The next thing you know, the entire journey is behind you, and you've just created something massive. And so that's kind of that in a nutshell is kind of the story that I want to tell in this next feature idea that I have.
That was Aaron Blaise, animator, filmmaker, co-founder of Creature Art Teacher. Do you have an interdisciplinary life? Because I would love to hear from you. Perhaps we can chat on this podcast that goes with my newsletter, also called Have You Thought About? And it can be found via www.wikishah.com. Please join me next time for a fun conversation with another guest who likes to make up lots of things in their life. Do listen to past episodes, rate and review the podcast if you've enjoyed it. And thank you to Rian Shah for the music.